this can be really tricky in JavaScript. Let's see how you can define what this is and how you can control it. So at first we have two objects. We have Jerry and Sarah. They have a name, an address, an occupation, and income. Now let's say you want to get the address of these guys. For this you have a function that you decide to call getAddress, and inside you simply return, you want to return this address, which would match this address for Jerry, this address line 10 for Sarah. But very soon you will see that the problem is that this is not what you would expect. So let's call this function getAddress, and at first this is this big object, it's a global object. So in Windows, when you're using JavaScript client side, this by default is window, and if you were in Node it would be global. But you want this to be Jerry, for example. What you have to do is to call this function using another function named call, and as a first argument you indicate what you want this to be inside this function. So let's say that we want it to be Jerry, and ta-da, you see now it works. It see clearly that this line 16 is Jerry, and so the address matches Jerry's address. Same thing if you used call on Sarah. You see now it's Sarah Connor, Los Angeles. So why would you use call? Simply because sometimes you have to use functions that, for example, have been exposed by a package that you don't have access to it. So you want to, let's say, hijack the function that is provided. So you would use call to make this inside the function to be whatever you want. Let's say that now we have a function, another function. We can get rid of this one. That would allow us to change the occupation of a user. And this would take an occupation, and you would want to change the occupation of this to become the one that is passed as an argument. As you guessed here, the problem is that now you have to make sure that when you use change occupation, it will be either Jerry or Sarah. So you already know how to do that. You know that you just simply have to take the function to use call to define that, for example, you want to change Sarah's occupation because, as you know, it's Sarah Connor, so she went from waitress to Terminator's killer. You define that this will be Sarah, and now you can pass the occupation, Terminator's killer. So now, if you console.log Sarah, you will see that now her occupation has become Terminator's killer, because you took this function, using call you decided that this inside the function would become Sarah, so this now is Sarah, and her occupation you decided to change it for this, you decided to make it Terminator's killer, which is this first parameter. But here, when you use call, it becomes the second one simply because the first one is used to define what is this. And you can see here, we can see this is Sarah. And if you wanted to change Jerry's, you could say actor, for example. So you can see that now Jerry's become an actor. So how would you pass several parameters to change occupation? Let's say you would have also a year of change. So you would pass a year of change, and here we would say, for example, occupation since year of change. So here let's quickly add also an occupation since. So for Jerry, I don't know, maybe it's since the beginning of the 80s. And Sarah, let's say she started working as a waitress 2 years before she met Kyle Reese. So now, if you want to pass several parameters here, because here change occupation expects 2 parameters, because here you see it doesn't know what is the occupation since, because Jerry has become an actor. So actor was passed occupation, but year of change hasn't been passed. So let's say he's become an actor since 2000. So now it works, or let's say 1999. So we don't have this income and this occupation that are the same. So you see now, when you want to pass several arguments, it's easy. You pass simply as many arguments as you want. But very often you will see that people like to pass simply an array. So if you want to pass a unique second argument here, then you have to use apply instead of call. So let's say that now he became a stand-up comedian, and it was since 75. So you see it works. So you use apply. There is a good trick to remember when you have to use a single array. It's simply when you use apply, because apply begins with an A, just as array begins with an A also. And you use call when you want to pass as many parameters as you want. And call starts with a C. You see, just as comma starts with a C. This is a very common trick to remember. So the only difference is that you use call when you want to pass as many parameters as you want, separating them by a comma, and apply when you want to use here an array. Let's say we want a function that will allow us to increase the income of a user. Let's create this function and let's name it increase salary. And you would pass it the value of the increase that you want to apply, and you would simply use the income and add the value to the income. And let's say, for example, that for a specific occupation like waitress here, you would use always a raise of $150. So you could create a new function that you would retrieve inside this variable that we decide to name increase waitress salary. And you would create this function by using increase salary, and this time by using bind. So bind returns a new function that takes as the first argument a user, for example, like Sarah, and the income that usually you apply to Sarah every time you give her a raise. So now this is a function, and every time you call it, you change the income of Sarah. Meaning that if you call it twice, and then you look at Sarah's object, you can see that now she's got an income of $1,300. The first time you called it, it went from 1,000 to 150. The second time you called it, it was increased from 150 again. So you see, with bind, you also decide what is this inside increase salary. So this became Sarah. But on top of that, you also passed this value that now is always 150. And bind returns a new function. That's why you can call it by adding an opening and closing bracket.